Science is all about identifying and solving problems. That's literally all it is when you boil it down to the basics. To solve the problems, you have to identify the variables and manipulate them to find the trends and discrepancies in the data. Then you evaluate the conclusion and repeat your test over and over again to verify your hypothesis. That's literally all it is. Let's say I'm late for work every day. Is it because my bus is late? Then I should try to get a taxi. Is it because I sit in the back of the teacher bus and I get off last? Then I should try to sit in the front and get off first. This is science. More broadly, science is much more significant and important. Sir Alexander Fleming in the discovery of penicillin, Sir Timothy Hunt in the discovery of cyclins, William Harvey in the discovery of the circulatory system. You owe a big thank you to science for your mass-produced clothes you can buy from Deprati, H&M, Forever 21, or Levi, because Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin back in 1793. Though handheld versions of it were used throughout India and Asia, Africa, and North America as early as the 5th century AD. This brings up a perfect opportunity to talk about historical perspectives being skewed toward Western civilizations. However, I'll save that for a different video. So, science is important. It's good for us. But for every beneficial discovery, I would place my bets that there's been at least one smear on the history of science crossing ethical boundaries and igniting fear and mistrust in the very people it was meant to help. Take Tuskegee University as an example. It was founded on the United States Independence Day in 1881 by Booker T. Washington and is still a historical black college university located in Tuskegee, Alabama. Washington led a fascinating life and history, and you should research into his background. Anyway, Tuskegee was inducted to expand higher education for African Americans during post-Civil War United States. This makes the future events seem much more dark and uncomfortable. It's very important to consider the ethical implications of research prior to designing your apparatus. Ethics are what is right or wrong, what rules, laws, and norms tell us to do. Ethics are also the standards we develop. It's no mistake that we feel bad when we see depressing videos about issues on animal abuse, poverty, or environmental conservation because we have a sense of the justice everything should have. It's a very difficult concept to describe, but I can give some prime examples. Back to Tuskegee, the U.S. Public Health Service established a clinical study which would later be known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Beginning in 1932, doctors injected the bacterium Treponema pallidum, or syphilis, into 600 black men. The service, they justified, was to understand the progression of the infection so that better treatments could be produced. Yeah, that sounds likely. Not. But what really makes it unethical is that the participants were not told they were being injected with syphilis, nor did they give consent. In fact, they were told they were being treated for bad blood. Mind you, penicillin had been discovered by this time, but it was not yet available for public access. However, had the study lasted the original time limit of 6 months, this would be a different story. The study actually lasted until 1972. Yes, 40 years. Penicillin was available for 27 of those years, but was never offered to the men, despite it becoming the drug of choice for syphilis in 1947. The men were never made clear the purpose of the study. The men never gave informed consent. The only thing they received was improper care for the infection, free meals, free medical exams, and free burial insurance. And for all of you history buffs, the Nuremberg Code was established in 1947. This international code included the following ethical requirements. Informed consent for experiments. Experiments must be scientifically necessary and conducted by qualified personnel. Human trials should be preceded by animal studies and surveys of a disease's natural history. And benefit to science must be weighed against risks and suffering of experimental subjects. And the U.S. Public Health Service, a U.S. government organization, paid a $10 million out-of-court settlement despite breaking the Nuremberg Code. What do you think about it? Do you agree that this was a very unethical study? Ethics are a social construct, and they're constantly changing. Tuskegee Institute and Nazi medical experiments aren't isolated cases either, and the changes in ethical experimentation comes with each smear on the history of investigation. For example, James Watson and Francis Crick obtained Rosalind Franklin's research and calculations and used it without her consent. Also, from 1942 to 1945, the United States oversaw the $2 billion Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb that was later used on Japan. Based on these examples, it's clear to see it is important to make ethical considerations in experimentation. Each type of experiment will deal with a different set of questions, so it takes time and practice to develop this skill. We can practice that now with the issues around stem cells. Stem cells are undifferentiated cells, or at least not fully differentiated, meaning that they have not become fully specialized yet. Further, they possess the quality of self-renewal, allowing them to continuously divide and replicate. Stem cells can be derived from one of three sources: embryos, umbilical cord blood or placentas, and some adult tissues such as bone marrow. However, each of these sources are at various stages of differentiation and come with their own ethical considerations. Embryos may be totipotent or pluripotent, which allows it to be a perfect candidate for therapeutic cloning. But embryos are developing baby organisms. In humans, this is usually seen as the development up to 9 weeks. After this point, they're generally viewed as a fetus. But when does a human begin to exist? Are embryos persons? Is it acceptable to destroy a life in order to save the lives of many? What protections do we provide to all persons? What types of embryos are acceptable to use? Those created via nuclear transfer, spare embryos from in vitro fertilization, or both? And there's no telling what could happen in the future with research. Would it be acceptable to create embryos only for research? Umbilical cord blood stem cells can be used for treating many blood and bone marrow diseases. As we age, our marrow stem cells lose their potency of stem cells. Cord blood is high in these and can be used to treat degeneration. But is it safe? Is there a real benefit to justify their use? They can also be used to repair tissues damaged from heart attacks and strokes. However, studies do not explain how this happens, and the results are difficult to reproduce. Eurostemcell.org states, when beneficial effects are observed, they may be very slight and not significant enough to be useful for developing treatments. If there are positive effects, they might be explained not by cord blood cells making nerve or heart cells, but by the cells in the cord blood releasing substances that help the body repair damage. However, there is such limited stem cells available in cord blood and the placenta that an average adult would need stem cells from 2 umbilical cords. Could this lead to harvesting cords and placentas for the sake of stem cells? Adult stem cells are much more limited in their capacity to differentiate, but they do have practical uses in medicine. This stem cell has shown benefits for bone and cartilage repair, heart and blood vessel repair, and show hopes of more. But again, the results are difficult to reproduce, and the stem cells have difficulty with implantation. At what point is something beneficial enough to continue research? Since adult stem cell research shows promising applications, does that warrant abandoning embryonic stem cell research? What ethical questions or points of view do you have?